there was like obviously evidence of this like wild party that had happened. And she wanted to have me arrested. And my brother, obviously also having his drugs, said, like, you can't do this to my little sister. I met him about 6 months before I went into prison, and I think on our first date when I told him, I think I'm going to go to jail, I told him the whole story, he thought I was joking. I don't know.
Hi guys, and welcome to The Truth Hurts with me, Tony Quinn. The Truth Hurts is a show about recovery and everything in between. I myself am a recovering addict, and I have the woman who I like to think saved my life, or played a role in saving my life in terms of my recovery. She was my counsellor in rehab and my sponsor for like a really short amount of time. And she's one of my greatest heroes and inspirations. So welcome, Nikki Munitz.
Thanks.
Hey.
That's a really cool intro.
It's true though, like it's really true. Every time I talk about recovery, you come up.
Thank you.
Just so you know, you affect people like that.
Cool.
So Nikki is also a recovering addict, someone in rehab I tried to bullshit and couldn't bullshit because she's a recovering addict and really, really difficult to lie to. So also Nikki's super honest and here to share her story with us, and she's going to tell us her struggle with addiction, her recovery and her trials and everything she's had to go through, her literal trials, everything she's had to go through in recovery. So welcome, Nix.
Thank you. I think I'm going to use that thing about being really difficult to lie to with my kids. I'm going to show them
Show them that. Tell them you can come speak to me. Tell them.
I don't know if they'll believe you. I seem to have got quite gullible over time with them.
I can't believe that. I can't see that.
So, my story.
Yes.
Growing up, Jewish, average middle class home, 3 older brothers, baby. And always feeling different. I suppose that set the tone, that I was the girl and the baby. And my brothers made it quite clear that I was separate, and I suppose my mom did too. Having had a little girl after 3 boys, everything was pink, room pink, curtains pink, clothes pink, bows freely.
I can't imagine that on you.
I actually have this picture that like kind of sums my life up, the discrepancy. It's me in full ballet gear, but with a broken arm, doing like this like pirouette.
That's perfect.
And like I think that was how I felt, you know. I had this picture that I was supposed to fit into, and I didn't fit.
Yeah.
But I played a part really well. The only thing that kind of set my life differently to everyone else around me was that my dad died when I was 10. And my mom was left with 4 kids, all under the age of 18.
Oh, yeah.
As a single mom, which I don't think is easy at the best of times. And my eldest brother also having quite a serious drug addiction, I suppose. So my mom was left, I think, quite clueless as to how to proceed. And as I moved up in age, I moved from being this kind of really wanting to please child, doing everything right, to like getting more interested in boys, you know, going out every weekend and drinking. So like just, it's almost like I had 2 different personalities. There was like me at school that did really well, sports-wise, academics, I had friends. And then there was this wild child that would come out that I just would throw my name away every weekend.
And this is in high school?
Yeah. And like, if you looked at me, you would never have picked up that anything was wrong.
Yeah. What's the mask?
I was great at it.
Yeah.
But like inside, I felt less than. I felt unworthy. I felt insignificant, probably. So it was almost as if like I had to try harder.
Yeah, I get that.
To be on the same playing field as everybody else. I drank a lot throughout school, and somewhat manageable.
Yeah.
Kind of. I also was waitressing, so like financially to help my mom, I was somewhat more independent maybe than some of my friends. The drugs only really started, like I smoked weed at school.
Yeah, the usual.
Took ecstasy like once or twice, but on my matric back, that's when things.
You in Cape Town?
Yeah,
Cape Town. Okay, same, Nikki.
Yeah. I got introduced to cocaine on that holiday.
Okay.
And I felt like the angels were singing.
Yeah.
It gave me confidence. I felt like I belonged.
That not wanting, that trying to fit in goes away because you're already in your mind fit in.
Yeah. And I just remember thinking to myself, like, I don't actually need anyone else.
Yeah.
You know, I had a really close group of friends, but from that matric holiday, I was just like, oh, I don't know, like, if you guys want to have me around, if you don't want to have me around, it's all good. Like, I found this thing that made me feel whole,
Yeah.
I suppose.
Yeah.
And essentially it led to a whole new group of friends and a new
As it
way of
does.
life. Yeah. And so I came home from that matric holiday. Most of my friends took a gap year, I didn't. And I went straight into varsity. Varsity that I landed. I did first year like 3 times.
Well done, Nikki.
Yeah, there was a pub on campus. It was RAL then, what the UJ now. And it opened at 11, so any lecture that I had after 11 just
Straight there.
never saw me.
Yeah.
And I was still waitressing, and I got introduced to heroin not long after I tried cocaine, actually.
Yeah, that's quite a quick transition from one to the other. Yeah.
And you know, I always think about how they teach kids about drugs. You know, and they get told drugs are bad and you shouldn't do it. And then I did cocaine, and I was like, this isn't bad. This is amazing. Like, why do parents lie to us? And then, because cocaine wasn't bad, when someone offered me heroin and they said it wasn't that bad, I was like, well, you know, maybe they were exaggerating, maybe it isn't that bad. And essentially that's what the guy told me. He was like, don't believe everything you see on TV, and it's really not that bad, and it just takes the edge off.
Did you shoot up or?
I didn't. Initially, like, I was schnaufing. And what he didn't tell me was how physically addictive it was.
That's like the biggest part of it, yeah. Of course
So-
he wouldn't tell you that.
Really, what it was, you know, with cocaine, as an addict, I don't know, I suppose that non-addicts don't experience this with cocaine, is that when you finish what you have and you're hanging for more, you try and make plans to get
Yes.
more and you feel, so he said to me, just use heroin and it takes that edge off and you can go to sleep. So I was like, well, that seems like a genius idea, actually. And so that's what it did initially. Plus, I always struggled with my weight. So with heroin, I could lose weight. I didn't really lose weight on cocaine, but heroin, like it was
quick.
almost instant.
Yeah.
So I was like, this is amazing. And later on, I read this article about a study that was done with guinea pigs, how they cried for their mothers when you took them away, and then they were given some heroin in water, and they weren't interested in their mothers anymore. So it actually gave this like a nurturing feeling. It was like this warm bubble. The problem was, if I used 3 days in a row, by the 4th day I was sick. And I didn't actually know what that was.
Didn't you know what it was?
I didn't.
Wow.
I didn't know. And like I was partying quite hard, I was at varsity, I was working, and so I was doing a lot of drugs, and I already knew I was in trouble. So yeah, the heroin just kind of progressed, the partying progressed, I already knew I was in trouble, and the first kind of conversation I had the friend who introduced me to heroin, we decided to have this big like going away party to say goodbye, and because we knew we were like not doing well. And I was house sitting my boss's house, which was right across the road from my mom's house. And
Good going,
it
yeah.
was great.
Good going on that one.
And I had a like 7 o'clock lecture the next morning, which obviously I didn't get to. And I woke up to my mom, my brother, and like 3 policemen standing over me. The gardener had let my mom into the house. And there was like obviously evidence of this like wild party that had happened. And she wanted to have me arrested. And my brother, obviously also having used drugs, said, like, you can't do this to my little sister. She's like 17 years old.
Oh, you were a baby.
You can't do this. So he let me come stay with him for a while, him and his girlfriend. And their treatment method for me was to pump me full of marijuana.
Oh, genius. Genius.
Yeah, so that kind of kept me comatose at least and got me through my first withdrawal. But then after a while he was like, yeah, you need to go back to your mom, our mom. And so I did, and this was the cycle that I found myself in, you know, getting into trouble, then doing something to stop. My mom even sent me to visit my other brother in Australia to try and like get me clean. That was true.
Australia is probably not the best place to send someone.
So, like, I flew via Malaysia, so I didn't take any drugs with me because I was too scared.
Yeah.
You know, knowing
Yeah.
that wasn't going to end well. And it was like 40-degree heat there, and I was there for 24 hours in Malaysia. By the time I arrived in Sydney, I was so ill. And when you withdraw of heroin, you get this like horrible like smell. My brother arrived to fetch me from the airport, and he was like, came to hug me, and then just kind of like reversed and took a step back. And I withdrew in his house for about a week, maybe 3-4 days. And then as soon as I was okay enough, I found King's Cross, which essentially is like Hillbrow here, and used throughout the entire time and came back in withdrawal.
Wow, Nikki.
So that didn't work. So the geographical thing was not the answer.
A lot of people try that. A lot of people are like, I'm just gonna leave Joburg, go to Cape Town, get clean, and then find a new way to get drugs there.
So I came back home, carried on using drugs. You know when I really knew I was in trouble? Like my druggy friends didn't want to hang out with me anymore.
Bro, it's the worst. That's when you know.
When they were saying to me, you've got a problem.
Nikki, that's our heroin, that's not yours. Share.
No, when I was like trying to sell my shoes to them and stuff, they were like, this is not good for you. So I went home and I like went to my mom and I told her that I needed help, and that's when she decided to send me to treatment for the first time. So she decided to send me to treatment in Cape Town. She didn't want me to go in Joburg. She thought I would just run away, which she probably was right.
Yeah.
And that started like this series of and starting to understand what recovery would take, but also making a whole bunch more mistakes and more drama, more messes. So I went to rehab in Cape Town. I thought I was going for 3 weeks. On my 18th birthday, my mom phoned me in rehab and told me I couldn't come home and that I needed to stay longer. So I went into a halfway house down there. Eventually, after 6 months, I got kicked out of the halfway house. I was actually using drugs, but that wasn't why I got kicked out.
Was it a romance?
It was a romance. So
rehab romance, guys.
Yeah. And I think that that's part of the reason why you can't bullshit me, because everything that you can do wrong, I did.
Yeah.
Probably more than once.
No, like for real, I could not bullshit you, Nikki. It was so frustrating.
Oh. So my mom, I got kicked out of the rehab and I phoned her and I was like, hey, I need to come home now. And then she said, well, no, you made your bed, line, you're not coming home.
Yeah.
So I stayed in Cape Town and I was living in backpackers and I was waitressing, and eventually I got fired from the restaurant that I worked at. The manager called me and said, you can't serve food to people looking the way that you do.
Were you using heroin then?
I was. And I lived in this backpackers that was in Observatory in Cape Town, and I used to catch the train with the caretaker who was like a little bit slow.
Yeah.
And my mom got a phone call from someone in the NA Fellowship in Cape Town to say that I needed help and I wasn't going to live much longer if she didn't get there. So she didn't know exactly where I was, but because I'd phoned her from the YMCA and Observatory, she arrived down there, and the caretaker took one look at her and said, are you looking for the white Jewish girl? I honestly stood out like a sore thumb. And he took her to where I was living, and there was a knock on the door when I opened the door, and I'd sold everything. So all I had was this mattress on the floor, and my drug dealer was sitting on the bed. My mom had given me a necklace for my 18th birthday, which I had given to him. He was wearing it. And my mom walked into the room and she just looked at like, the squalor that I was living in. And she looked at this dealer and she just said to him, "You take that necklace off right now." My mom's pretty scary.
Straight up to a dealer.
Which he did, and then he left. Yeah. And then my mom took me to a hotel for the weekend. And at the end of the weekend, she said to me, "You need to go back to treatment." And I was like, "Yeah, you're right." Sent me to Plate. Cape Town didn't work, like send me to Plate.
Let's do another geographical.
Yeah. And she said, "No, your time at the beach is over.
Oh, I know what's coming next.
You're gonna go to." Whoa. Yeah. And I begged and I begged and I begged and other options and please, I promise. And my mom was one of the founding members of Tough Love in this country, so she was pretty hardcore.
Oh, okay.
And yeah, she booked my bus ticket, booked me into Norfolk, and took me to the bus stop there in Cape Town. I weighed 37 kilos. She had to catch a flight back to Joburg, so she gave me my ticket and she hugged me and she said, "Please get on this bus, and I know that if you don't, I won't see you alive again." And she left me.
I just want to say that is the place where, if like I have a contract with my mom and my late dad, that if I ever relapse again, that's where they're sending me. That's what people do to make sure their kids do not relapse. That's how hectic that rehab is.
Yeah.
Can I ask?
Yes.
What's so hectic about it and where is it?
In the Karoo.
It's in the middle of nowhere.
Like, I'll get it. I mean, I've been to prison, and prison was a walk in the park compared to.
We'll get to that too.
So, the agreement was that I would have to do a year, or I wasn't allowed to come home. So
Chili's face.
I did. I got on the bus and I got to. And the truth for me is that, as scary a place as it was, my life was scarier, and I was so grateful to not have to mission and like make plans for money, and because I had been fired, so like getting money was a story now, and that I was just grateful to have a bed to sleep and to have people around me actually that didn't necessarily want anything from me. There was relief. So I was there during that time when Logan died. He was a 16-year-old boy. They tried to run away and they locked him up in solitary confinement.
No, that was terrible.
Yeah, and the end result of that was they started up a detox house, which they didn't have before. So essentially when you arrived in you would go straight into work. So they had different jobs there, like the boys would go on the dog team, they would look after the pit bulls, or they'd work on the farm, and the woman, of course, worked in the kitchen.
Oh, of course.
Or looking after the kids in the crèche.
Oh, that's so typical.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so they started this detox house where you go for 2 weeks and then go into your work detail.
So you missed all of that?
No, I went straight into work. I was working in the kitchen. And then after Logan died, when they started the detox house, they put me and my now ex-husband in charge. So like the one thing that I was craving so badly is connection and family throughout this entire thing. Like even though I've got 3 brothers and I've got a mom, like we're not the closest family in the world. And even if we were, there was something missing for me, that real connection.
Yeah.
You know, I still had to wear masks with them. And they didn't explain it to me when I was in treatment the first time. And so I really thought the solution to my problem was to have my own family. And so when I met JP running the detox house together, I thought this was the answer. You know, his parents were still married. So I thought that maybe, you know, like he understands what a family unit is about and what love is about. I didn't have that, obviously, growing up. And we got together and we came out of.
So you were there for the year?
I was there for a year. So I left, JP left couple months before me. He had relapsed, I didn't, and he went back into treatment. We carried on seeing each other and decided that we wanted to be together, to move in together. And because we'd been really indoctrinated through the church and all the Christianity stuff, his very romantic proposal to me was we either need to break up or get married. So in my 21-year-old wisdom, decided that getting married was a great idea.
That's the only way to go.
Absolutely.
At the age of 21. Straight out of rehab.
And I think that part of my thinking was that I just desperately wanted a family.
Yeah.
I wanted a place to belong. I wanted to be loved and I wanted to love. And so we got together, we got married, and we had 2 beautiful children together, and we actually stayed clean for just under 8 years. Now I describe it as playing house, which is what I think we were doing. And when the wheels started to fall off, I think he relapsed a little bit before me, and then I relapsed. I missed just about the entire first year of my son's life. I was very lucky to have like a nanny that looked after my kids, and that the sum total of my mothering duties was to make sure there was food in the house, which I was capable of doing. And yeah, that relapse, it was about 8 months, but it was probably the most painful time of my life. I got arrested for the first time when I took drugs into the rehab where my ex-husband was.
Did you bring them in for him?
I did.
Yeah.
And they called the police, and it was a Sunday morning, and I asked the arresting officer, who was a woman, for special bail she could have arranged, and she basically said that my children were better off without me, and that she held me for the full 48 hours, and I got bail on the Tuesday. The second arrest came during my relapse. I'd been working for a law firm, and I got access to the trust account.
Never give an addict a trust account.
Definitely not. Heroin addiction, access to trust account, not a good combination. And so the process of events was that I got caught stealing in November 2007. I got clean in December 2008, and I got arrested for the first time on that charge in March 2009.
So in your recovery was when that consequence came
so
up.
I was under investigation for a year, and I was 3 months clean when I got arrested for it. Being arrested twice in front of my children, I'm grateful every day that my son has very little memory. I don't think he has any memory, actually, of that time. My daughter remembers quite a lot. Mom, do you remember when you were naughty and the police took you? And the last time I used, we had driven through to Joburg to buy drugs, stopped at a restaurant to use the drugs, and I went into the bathroom, I shot up in the toilet. I came back to the table. I remember wanting to say something, but the words I wanted to say weren't coming out of my mouth, like there was some misfiring happening. I wasn't making sense, and that's the last thing I remember. I overdosed, and was very lucky that Alex Hanlon, who owns Hampton House, was at the restaurant having, I think it was a brunch, probably, with a sponsee.
That's insane.
And now I'm friends with both of them, so when they tell me the story, it's pretty funny.
You're so lucky to have had 2 people, one really experienced counsellor and heroin addict in the room with you.
Very much. So when Troy tells me the story, he said, he told Alex, look, that chick is sleeping. And when Alex turned around, he said, no, she's not sleeping, she's dead. Jesus. So They gave me mouth to mouth, they resuscitated me. My husband wouldn't allow them to call the paramedics, he was afraid that the police would come. So he just stuck me in the car, drove me through to Pretoria. I don't really remember much of this. I stopped breathing again, he took me to Munitz Hospital. But because our medical aid had lapsed, we hadn't paid the premium. Munitz wouldn't help us. I remember him fighting with the nurse there. And then I remember waking up 2 days later at Pretoria Academic Hospital. And the scene that I woke up to was my ex-husband pulling the IV out of my arm and shooting me up in front of my daughter, thinking he was doing a really kind thing because I would have been in withdrawal when I was sick.
Oh, he's alleviating the...
Yeah. And when I got back home and we lived with his parents, his mother told me that I'm the worst mother she's ever seen. And that was the second time that someone had told me that I was a bad mom, and like something just clicked into place. That this thing that I wanted so badly, a family, I was like stuffing it up monumentally.
You were annihilating it.
Yeah. And that was the last time I used.
So you didn't actually go to rehab, you just put it down?
When I got arrested the first time, I went into treatment, but I'd RHT'd and left.
And refused hospital treatment.
Yeah. And my ex carried on using. That was really hard, living in the same house as someone who's still using.
Were you living with him still at that time? And you had put everything down and he was still... Wow.
And people think I'm crazy, but like the fraud case that was happening against me was probably the thing that saved my life. Aside from the fact that my ex-husband was really physically abusive, living with someone that's in active addiction while you're trying to get clean is next to impossible. But my lawyers, because we were all charged together, me, my ex-husband and his father, they told me that I needed to leave in order to build up some type of defense for myself, because they were trying to blame me for the whole thing.
Yes.
Because although I was the one physically taking the money, I was giving the money to them. So I moved out. I was still living in Pretoria at the time. I think I was still scared. My relationship with my family had broken down so much that I was kind of in no man's land still. And so many realizations came to me during that period about what it means to be a mom, how I wanted to help other women. Like that was a big thing for me.
And that's something you've done. I can tell you that.
Empowering women. You know, I'd always been so insecure around other women. I'd never had many girlfriends. And then through this experience, I was like, how many women feel alone? Like I felt alone. And you know, when I had a black eye or you know, a cracked jaw or a thing, like who, I wouldn't have told anyone. I didn't have anyone to tell. And now I've got a daughter, and I was like, I don't want that for her. Like, women need to have voice, and I needed to have a voice. And so my lawyers told me that I needed to leave, which I did. Stayed in Pretoria, and then eventually moved back in with my mom. Took my 2 children. My son was about 18 months old, my daughter 4. And yeah, that started my journey into, I'm gonna say it's more than recovery, because it was, I get to live my passion. I found my purpose and I get to live it each and every single day with people like you.
It's gonna make me cry.
Like, I don't know how many people get to say what a cool job they've got.
So you became, did you begin studying to be a counsellor, or did you do it through a treatment centre?
So I had no idea how I was going to get there. I knew that's what I wanted. And so I started volunteering. I volunteered at a place called Wedge Gardens, which is pretty hardcore. It's a treatment centre. Now they've changed it, but it was for men only then. And people that are kind of like the end of the road.
Yeah.
Families have left you, they're homeless on the street, so it's really hardcore. I worked there for about 6 months. Then I got offered a really low paying position at another treatment centre, which I did. And in the meantime, I finished my degree and started just doing a whole bunch of counselling courses, various ones. And then I got offered a job at Heroine House, which was amazing.
That's the man that saved your life that day in the restaurant?
I mean, like the way the tapestry all kind of
It's
fits
insane.
together is bizarre. And I started working at Heroine House as initially in admin, and then proceeded to move from outpatient treatment to inpatient treatment. And the whole thing was that I still had this court case pending. So the crime happened in 2007, got arrested the first time in 2009, got sentenced for the first time in 2011.
And how long had you been sober?
So I got clean in 2008. And in 2011, I got sentenced to 5 years in prison. And that kind of knocked the wind right out of my sails.
You hear something like that and you hear someone's sorted their life out and they've made changes in their behavior, and then the consequence of active addiction and what you've done in active addiction comes up, and it's so amazing to me, and this is something that I've always found inspiring about you, is that happened and you still stayed clean. And I mean, that is the biggest reservation for anyone. If anything goes wrong, a death, a loss, something as severe as that, it's what your first, it's an excuse to relapse. And you did you're an amazing woman.
Thank you.
Yeah, carry on. I love her.
For me, addiction was a life sentence, and prison, no matter what happened, it would eventually come to an end. And it was a no-brainer for me. And so I got sentenced to 5 years, but I appealed and I went to high court. All the time working in the treatment field and growing my passion for helping people, and my desire to understand more about this disease and to develop more tools to help people change their life. And then I lost my appeal in high court. It's so weird, when you go to appeal, they give you a month to sort your life out before you have to hand yourself in and go into prison. Mm-hmm. It's really a weird experience. It's you've got to go and you've got a month to get your life sorted
and prepare yourself emotionally.
Wow. That was really hard.
Yeah.
I chose to only tell the kids the night before.
Oh, really?
Which was really hard. I think my son's only question to me was, "Mom, if this happened so long ago, why now?" And I think the biggest gift I could give my children was honesty.
See?
Never ever lied to them, obviously within the realm of their age. I've always told them the truth, and that they have to understand, number one, we'll make mistakes. Number two, there's consequences for mistakes. And number three, you can pick yourself up again, and you can move forward. So that was really hard. They went to school the next morning and I went to prison. Thinking that I would have to serve 50% of my sentence, which would have been 2.5 years. In the meantime, I had people working behind the scenes fighting for me, and they managed to get my case heard in the Supreme Court. In which case that they extended my bail. So after 2 months I came out of prison, and the saga continued. This was in 2014. In 2015 the matter was finalized, and the sentence was decreased quite dramatically to a 3-year 2761I, which you have to serve 1/6 of your sentence. And I had another month. This time I told the kids a week before, and I mean that was really hard because I thought I wouldn't have to do that again to them. But we're a family and we got through it. And in the process I'd also met my partner Clive.
Clive's the best.
I met him about 6 months before I went into prison, and I think on our first date when I told him I think I'm going to go to jail, I told him the whole story, he thought I was joking. I don't know, because 6 months later I went to jail. And he stepped up to the plate and moved in with my mom to help look after my children.
Yes, bro. See, these are the gifts of recovery, even when you have to face those severe consequences. These gifts do actually happen.
It's amazing, and we've been together 5 years. He's busy adopting the kids.
See it all.
Yeah.
Oh my God, clap!
How cool.
That's amazing, Nikki.
And yeah, I did my time, had lots of time to reflect in prison about what's important to me. And like I've come out, I think grown up. I think I grew up. I think that before prison, like I didn't know, I was fighting this war, but I didn't realize that the war was with me.
Yeah.
And now I realize that I don't have to fight anymore.
That's beautiful.
Yeah, it's very cool. And my life is pretty peaceful for the most part.
And you're helping people.
And I get to help people.
So you counsel today addicts and trauma patients and stuff like that?
I do. I did this course while I was in prison on self-esteem. And for me, that was like a missing piece. And so that's really my ultimate focus, because I think that although it was drugs that got me to a broken place, my real issue was that I had no self-esteem.
Yeah.
And I think that 90% of the population struggles with that we're all looking for that outside fix to make us okay. And so like the work that I do is to help people empower themselves and to live their best life, where they're the most effective human beings they can be, and they choose to make their lives fulfilling, and that everyone has a voice.
Everyone has a voice.
Yeah.
That's one thing you taught me, is that I do have a voice and I can use my voice. Nikki, your story is every time, and this is for real. Nikki was the person my dad phoned when I needed to go to my last rehab, and she picked up the phone and he said to her, my daughter has anorexia and she's addicted to meth and cat, and Nikki said she's gonna die, get her to rehab as soon as possible. And he took me there the next day, and I saw this woman. I'll never forget when I first saw you, and I was petrified. I was like, I knew I couldn't lie to you. I knew you were a recovering addict, and I knew you weren't gonna take my shit. And then you counseled me, you were my counselor. And you said to me one day, you said something very harsh to me in a group session. And you said to me, I was using my cousin's death as an excuse. And you said, okay, so how does it feel to have disrespected the memory of your cousin who's dead? And at that point, something clicked in me, because I wanted to punch you, and I was like, she will beat me up, because you will. And something clicked then, and that was one little piece of like this whole puzzle that kept me sober and kept me going. And I'm just one person. I know that everyone I speak to who knows you and has heard you speak and has who you've helped is just in awe of you as a person, because you're honest, you're brutal with your truth and other people's truth when they need honest advice, and you really do save lives. And the world needs to hear your story, and people need to know, if they have a story like yours, that they can share it without that fear of judgment. Because I don't know how I would ever have coped with the stuff you've coped with. And to know that it's possible, and for everyone out there to know that dealing with something, I mean, you'd been sober for so long and had to face a consequence from so long ago, and you did it. And you did it because you had to. And you had no other choice. And you came out of it stronger and more empowered than ever. And I wish I could be even half the woman you are. You're incredible, Nikki.
Thank you.
And thank you for sharing your story with us. And thank you for saving my life. That's Nikki Munitz, guys. And that's her truth. Yay!
Please tell me it recorded.
No.
You fucking
I'm joking.
I was gonna say, peace out.